Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the grand ballroom, but inside, the opulence gala was warm and suffocating. The air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and even more expensive perfume. I stood by the dessert table, my back aching as I rocked the heavy triple stroller back and forth. I was trying to keep Ford, Blaine, and Calloway from crying, but the loud orchestra was making them restless. I looked down at my dress. It was a simple department store find from 3 years ago, now slightly tight and stained with a faint smudge of mashed peas from earlier that evening. I felt like a gray moth in a room full of peacocks. Thayer, my husband of 5 years, suddenly appeared. He didn't look at me with affection. He didn't look at the boys at all. His eyes were cold, darting around to make sure no one was watching us. He grabbed my upper arm with a grip that was far too tight and pulled me into a shadowed service alcove behind a velvet curtain. "What is it, Thayer?" I whispered, hoping he was finally ready to take us home. "The boys are exhausted." He shoved a cream-colored envelope into my hand. "Happy anniversary, Hadley," he said. His voice was like a blade of ice. I opened it, expecting perhaps a card or a quiet apology for being so distant lately. My heart stopped. It wasn't a card. It was a thick stack of legal documents. At the very top, in bold, cruel letters, were the words, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." "I'm becoming CEO of Apex Global next month, Hadley," he sneered, leaning in close so only I could hear. "This company is about power, prestige, and image. I need a power couple image to lead this empire. I don't need a milk-stained housewife who wears department store clearance and spends her days talking about diaper rashes." Before I could even find my breath to speak, a woman stepped out from the shadows behind him. It was Winslow. She was a stunning socialite, the daughter of one of the company's minority shareholders, and she was draped in diamonds that cost more than our house. She smiled a sharp, predatory smile and plucked a piece of invisible lint off Thayer's lapel. "You missed a spot, sweetie," she said to me, her voice dripping with fake pity. Thayer didn't look back as he pointed a trembling finger toward the service exit. "Leave, now. Take the kids and go out the back. You're embarrassing me in front of the people who actually matter." My name is Hadley, and my husband just traded his family for a title, without realizing my children own the title he's chasing. The heavy steel door of the service entrance slammed shut behind me, locking with a definitive click. I was standing in the dark alleyway, shoved out into the pouring rain. The wind was so strong it nearly tipped the triple stroller. I stood there for a second, drenched and shivering, looking at the brick wall. I didn't have a car. Thayer had insisted on driving us in the company car so he could show off, and he had the keys in his pocket. My phone buzzed in my clutch. It was a text from Thayer. "I'm cutting your access to the joint cards tonight. I'll send a small monthly check for the kids' basic needs. Stay at a motel. Don't come back to the house. Winslow is moving in. Keep the kids away from the press. They are financial liabilities to my new image." Financial liabilities. He was talking about his own sons. I pushed the heavy stroller through the puddles, my heels splashing in the cold water. I walked 3 miles down the highway, my gala dress soaked through and ruined, clinging to my legs like a second skin. Every time a car drove past, splashing me with mud, I felt a new layer of shame. I finally found a cheap, flickering motel on the edge of the city. The room smelled like old cigarettes and bleach. I lifted Ford, Blaine, and Calloway out of their damp clothes and tucked them into the lumpy bed. I sat on the floor, shivering, watching them sleep. I had given up everything for Thayer. I had left my own family, sacrificed my career in finance, and given my body and youth to help him climb the ladder at Apex Global. I had been his secret weapon, his editor, and his support system, and he had discarded me like a piece of trash the moment he thought he had reached the top. I gripped the edge of the motel bed, my knuckles white. He thought he was winning. He thought he had finally escaped the burden of a family. He had no idea that the world he was trying to build was about to crumble under the weight of his own greed. The next morning, the sun bled through the thin, yellowed curtains of the motel room. I was sitting at a small, wobbly table, counting the loose coins in my purse to see if I had enough for 3 cartons of milk and a box of cereal. I had exactly $7.42. A sharp, professional knock sounded at the door. I froze. My first thought was that Thayer had sent a process server to take the boys away. I grabbed a heavy glass ashtray from the nightstand, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice cracking. "Mrs. Hadley, my name is Mr. Rhodes. I am an attorney representing the estate of your late father." I lowered the ashtray. I hadn't spoken to my father in 10 years. He was a reclusive billionaire who had disowned me when I chose to marry Thayer for love, instead of marrying the man he had picked for me. I wanted a life built on my own terms, not on his money. Thayer never even knew who my father was. I had told him I was an orphan from a modest background. I opened the door. An older man in a charcoal gray suit stood there, looking completely out of place in the dingy motel hallway. He looked at my disheveled hair and my ruined dress with a look of deep sorrow. "I have some news," Rhodes said, stepping into the room. "Your father passed away last week. He had been watching you, Hadley. He knew about Thayer. He knew about the affairs, the neglect, and the way you were being treated." I sat on the edge of the bed, stunned. He knew. He knew everything. He wanted to help you, but he knew that if he gave the money to you directly, Thayer would find a way to take half in a divorce. He wanted to protect his legacy from fortune hunters. Rhodes opened a leather briefcase and pulled out a thick bound folder. "In his will, he bypassed you. He left 51% of the controlling voting stock of Apex Global directly to Ford, Blaine, and Callaway." My knees gave out and I slumped onto the floor. The room seemed to spin. "They own the company," I whispered. "Thayer's company." "It was never Thayer's company," Rhodes corrected me gently, helping me back to the bed. "Apex Global was a subsidiary of your father's holding group. He bought it years ago through a shell corporation just to watch Thayer's performance. Your sons are now the majority shareholders. They own the building, the patents, and the very chair Thayer sits in." I looked at my 3 boys. Ford was chewing on a plastic block, Blaine was staring at a fly on the wall, and Callaway was trying to put his socks on his ears. They were toddlers. They didn't even know how to use a spoon, yet they held the power of an international empire in their tiny hands. "But they're Bobby's," I said. "How can they?" "That is where you come in," Rhodes said, handing me a silver tablet. "Under the terms of the trust, until the children turn 21, you have been appointed as the sole executive proxy. You wield their vote. You have the power to hire, fire, and liquidate. You are effectively the chairman of the board of Apex Global." I took the tablet. The screen glowed with the corporate logo of Apex. I logged in with the biometric scan Rhodes provided. There it was. A list of every executive, every salary, and every secret project. At the very top of the hierarchy above the CEO were 3 names: Ford, Blaine, and Callaway. I looked at the motel door, then back at the tablet. I wasn't a destitute mother counting coins anymore. I was the person who held Thayer's entire life in my hand. I was his boss. "He has no idea," I muttered, a cold spark of fire lighting up in my chest. "None," Rhodes agreed. "He believes the majority shares are held by a reclusive European trust. He's been trying to get a meeting with the proxy for months." I stared at the tablet for a long time. My finger hovered over the terminate button next to Thayer's name. I wanted to press it right then. I wanted to see the look on his face when he found out the milk-stained housewife had just fired him from his dream job. "Do I do it now?" I asked. "Can I fire him this second?" Mr. Rhodes shook his head. "You could, but I wouldn't recommend it. Not yet. Thayer is a snake, Hadley. He has spent the last year hiding assets and moving money into offshore accounts in anticipation of this divorce. If you fire him today, he will claim you are using the children's trust to retaliate, and his lawyers will tie you up in court for years. He might even get a piece of the boys' inheritance if we don't play this right." I leaned back against the headboard, thinking. The anger in my veins was boiling, but I knew Rhodes was right. I needed to be smart. I needed to be the woman I was before I became just a wife. "What do we do?" I asked. "We wait," Rhodes said. "Thayer has 30 days before the board meeting to confirm his permanent CEO status. During those 30 days, he will have to submit to a deep-level audit. As the proxy, you have access to everything he does, every email, every transaction, every secret lunch with Winslow. We let him think he's winning. We let him get comfortable. And when he eventually tries to steal from the company to fund his new life, we catch him. I looked at the boys, who were now playing happily on the floor. 30 days, I whispered. I can survive 30 days of him thinking I'm nothing. I'll let him be the king of the gala, and then I'll bring the whole kingdom down on his head. I will arrange for a private secure fund for you to live on, Rhodes added. But we must keep it quiet. Thayer cannot know you have money until the moment of the meeting. 3 days later, Thayer called for an emergency divorce mediation. He wanted things settled quickly and quietly before his big promotion. I walked into the glass-walled conference room at his lawyer's office, wearing a faded cardigan and jeans. I made sure to look tired. I wanted him to see exactly what he expected to see. Thayer sat across from me, looking tanned and smug. He was holding Winslow's hand under the table, though he thought I couldn't see it. Winslow was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my first car. "Let's make this simple, Hadley," Thayer said, sliding a single sheet of paper toward me. "I'm offering you $500 a month in spousal support. I'll pay for the boys' health insurance, but that's it. Business is slow at Apex Global, and the company is struggling. My salary is being cut to help with the overhead." I looked down at the paper. It was a lie. I had spent the previous night on my secure tablet looking at the real financials. Apex Global was making record-breaking profits. Thayer was actually planning to give himself a $10 million bonus the moment his CEO position was confirmed. $500? I asked, my voice small and shaky. "Thayer, the rent on a decent apartment is more than that. How am I supposed to feed 3 bobbies?" "That's your problem," Winslow chirped, her voice like nails on a chalkboard. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you let yourself go. Thayer is a high flyer now. He can't be bogged down by your financial demands." "Okay, Thayer," I said, looking down at my lap to hide the smile that was threatening to break through. "If the company is struggling, I don't want to be a burden. I'll sign whatever you want." Thayer grinned, a look of pure triumph on his face. He thought he had bullied me into submission. He had no idea I was just documenting his fraud for the board. I was letting him dig his own grave, and he was doing it with a golden shovel. That night, I was sitting in my new, modest apartment that Mr. Rhodes had secured for me. I was watching the live feed of Thayer's corporate credit card on my tablet. It was like watching a movie of his bad decisions. Suddenly, a notification popped up on the screen. "Pending transaction, 50,000 merchant, Cartier Jewelers status, awaiting proxy approval for high-value purchase." I looked at the details. Thayer was trying to buy Winslow a diamond choker. He had coded it into the system as a business marketing gift for potential investors. He was using the company's money to buy his mistress a "sorry your dress got ruined" present. I felt a surge of cold power. As the proxy, I was the one the system asked when a purchase exceeded the CEO's limit. I had the power to make him look like a fool in front of the woman he was trying to impress. I hovered my finger over the red button on the screen. Deny. I added a note in the system, non-business expense, flag for audit. 5 minutes later, my personal phone rang. It was Thayer. He was screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "Hadley, did you do something to my credit card?" he roared. "I'm standing in the middle of a store and the clerk just told me the transaction was declined by the board." "Me?" I asked, my voice innocent and confused. "Thayer, I don't even have a bank account anymore, remember? You cut me off. How could I possibly control your corporate cards?" "Then why did they say the board is watching me?" he hissed. "Maybe the board realized you're spending more than the company makes," I suggested. "You did say business was slow at mediation, right? Maybe they're just taking you at your word." He slammed the phone down. I leaned back and smiled. This was the first time in 5 years I felt like I was winning. I wasn't just surviving, I was fighting back. Thayer came to my motel room, the one he thought I was still living in, to drop off the first pity check. He wanted to see me miserable. He wanted to feel superior one more time. He stood in the doorway of the dingy room, looking at the peeling wallpaper and the stained carpet. He laughed, a short, sharp sound of pure arrogance. "Look at you, Hadley," he said, adjusting his silk tie. "You look like a maid. This is where you belong. Some people are meant for the penthouse and some are meant for the gutter. I'm glad we finally figured out which was which." Winslow waited in the car outside, leaning on the horn of his new Porsche. She didn't even want to step foot on the motel property. "The boys miss you, Thayer," I said quietly, gesturing to where the triplets were playing with a single plastic truck on the floor. "They don't understand why you don't come home." "Tell them I'm busy running an empire," he scoffed, not even glancing at his sons. "I don't have time for diapers and crying. I'm about to be the face of the most powerful company in the city. I need to be focused." He turned to leave, but as he walked past the boys, he deliberately kicked the toy truck out of his way. It skittered across the floor and hit the wall with a loud crack. Calloway, who loved that truck more than anything, burst into tears. "Watch where you're going," Thayer snapped at the crying 1-year-old. "And tell your mother to get a job. This check is the last one I'm hand-delivering." I watched him walk out, my heart breaking for my son, but my mind sharpening like a diamond. He called it an empire. He called himself a legend. He had no idea that the empire was already under new management. He had just kicked the toy of the person who technically owned his office. 2 weeks into my 30-day plan, Thayer told his secretary he was going to Dubai for a critical investor meeting. He claimed it was a secret mission to secure the future of Apex Global. In reality, he told the board he needed $50,000 for travel expenses. I didn't need to guess where he was. I had access to the fleet tracking on his company car and the private jet manifest. He wasn't in Dubai. He was at a 5-star luxury spa resort in Napa Valley with Winslow. I sat in my real apartment. The penthouse Rhodes had rented for me, and watched the GPS dot on my screen. He was currently at the spa's champagne bar. As the executive proxy, I had the power to call emergency operational checks at any time. I waited until it was 3:00 a.m. in California. I knew he would be fast asleep after a night of partying. I hit the mandatory virtual briefing button on my tablet. The system automatically sent an alert to Thayer's phone and laptop that could not be silenced. It was an encrypted Zoom link from the majority shareholder's office. I watched through the hidden admin view. Thayer scrambled out of bed in a panic. He looked disheveled, his hair sticking up in every direction. He had to run into the hotel bathroom and hang a white towel over the shower curtain to create a fake, neutral background. In the background, I could hear Winslow screaming, "Thayer, turn that off, it's the middle of the night." "Shut up, Winslow," he hissed, leaning into the camera. "It's the board I have to answer." I didn't turn on my camera. I used a voice modulator to sound like a stern, older man. "Mr. Thayer, we noticed you aren't in the Dubai time zone. This is a violation of your travel disclosure." I had a flight delay," he stammered, sweating under the bathroom lights. "I'm in a transit lounge, very secret." "Get to Dubai, Thayer," I said coldly, "or don't bother coming back to the office." I ended the call. Watching him sweat in a hotel bathroom was better than any anniversary gift he could have ever given me. I spent my nights deep diving into the company's internal server. Now that I knew Thayer was a liar, I wanted to see exactly how bad of a leader he really was. I found a hidden, password-protected folder named Project Onyx. It took Rhodes' tech team only an hour to crack it. When I saw the contents, my blood ran cold. Thayer was planning a massive corporate restructuring. He was going to outsource the entire manufacturing division to a high-volume sweatshop overseas. He was doing this to artificially inflate the company's profit margins for 1 quarter, just long enough for him to collect a massive performance bonus and sell his own shares at a high price before the company's quality collapsed. If he went through with this, he would be firing over 2,000 loyal American workers. Many of these people had been with the company since my father started it. They were families with mortgages and children. He was going to announce Project Onyx, at his CEO confirmation, hearing as his first bold move as the permanent leader. He thought it made him look like a ruthless, efficient titan of industry. "He's going to destroy the company just for a quick check," I told Blaine, who was sitting on my lap, happily chewing on the rubber end of my tablet's stylus. "He doesn't care about the legacy. He doesn't care about the people. He just wants to be a power couple with Winslow on a yacht." I looked at the list of names, the 2,000 people who were about to lose everything. I felt a sense of responsibility I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just fighting for my sons anymore. I was fighting for the families Thayer viewed as liabilities. "Not on my watch, Thayer," I whispered, petting Blaine's hair. "You think you're a shark, but you're just a parasite, and I'm about to cut you off." I was at the local grocery store near the motel, the one I still visited occasionally to keep up the appearance of being broke, when I bumped into Winslow. She was standing in the checkout line, wearing a designer tracksuit and oversized sunglasses. She looked at my cart, which was filled with generic brand diapers and cheap baby food. She let out a soft, mocking laugh that made the people around us turn their heads. "Still spending Thayer's pity money, I see," she sneered, leaning against the counter. She tapped her manicured nails on a bottle of vintage champagne she was buying. "It must be so exhausting, living like this, counting pennies while we're out counting stars." I didn't say anything. I just kept my eyes on the credit card reader, waiting for the declined message I knew wouldn't come because Rhodes had finally set up my hidden account. "Just so you know, Hadley," Winslow continued, leaning in close so her perfume filled my space. "When we get married next month, we've already made a decision. We're sending those triplets to a boarding school in Switzerland. Thayer doesn't want them around ruining the aesthetic of our new home. He says they're too loud, and they remind him of a time when he was settling for less." My blood ran cold. The generic diapers in my hand felt like lead. He wasn't just neglecting them. He was planning to exile his own sons to another continent just to keep his mistress happy. He wanted to erase their existence from his perfect life. "They're his children, Winslow," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "They're his mistakes," she corrected me with a smirk. "And soon they'll be someone else's problem. Enjoy the generic diapers while you can. Soon you won't even have those." She walked away, laughing. I stood there, my hand trembling as I paid for the groceries. I wasn't sad. I was beyond sad. I was in a place of pure, focused rage. He wasn't just a bad husband, he was a monster. And I was going to make sure he never saw another aesthetic moment in his life. The outsourcing plan, Project Onyx, was a terrible business move, but it wasn't technically illegal. I couldn't fire Thayer for being a bad person. I needed a crime. I needed proof of something that would allow the board to terminate him for cause, ensuring he walked away with $0 and no severance. I spent the next 3 days digging through every invoice and every wire transfer. I looked at the consulting fees section of the budget. It was a massive black hole. I found a series of payments totaling over $2 million over the last 6 months. They were paid to a company called W-Star Marketing Solutions. I called Rhodes, find out who owns W-Star. An hour later, the file landed on my tablet. W-Star Marketing Solutions was a shell company registered to Winslow's maiden name. She didn't even have a marketing degree. There was no evidence that a single minute of consulting had ever happened. Thayer was embezzling company funds to pay for Winslow's lifestyle. He was using the money meant for employee salaries to buy her designer clothes, her jewelry, and even the very car she had used to honk at me at the motel. "I have the receipts," I told Rhodes, my heart pounding with excitement. $2 million in 6 months. That's grand larceny. That's a felony. "It's more than enough," Rhodes said. "The board will have no choice but to terminate him immediately. And because of the morality clause in his contract, he'll lose every single stock option he has. He'll be broke, Hadley, truly broke." I downloaded every invoice, every wire transfer, and every fake contract. I saved them to a folder on my tablet labeled "The End." I looked at the calendar. The board meeting was only 5 days away. Thayer thought he was 5 days away from becoming a king. He didn't realize he was 5 days away from a prison cell. Just as I thought I had everything under control, Thayer threw one last curveball. He filed an emergency motion for full custody of the triplets. He didn't want the boys, I knew that. But his expensive PR lawyer had told him that a family man image was essential for the CEO confirmation. He needed a photo of himself with his sons to put in the annual report. "Look at where she lives," Thayer argued in the courtroom the next morning. He pointed at me with a look of mock pity. "She lives in a dingy highway motel. She's unemployed. She's unstable. My sons are living in squalor while I have a 10-bedroom estate waiting for them." The judge looked at me, then at the photos Thayer's lawyer had provided of the motel room. He looked genuinely concerned. "Mrs. Hadley, do you have a stable residence for these children? This motel is not a suitable environment for 3 infants." I looked at Thayer. He was smirking at me, thinking he had finally found a way to hurt me where it mattered most. He thought he could take my bobbies away just to use them as props in a corporate brochure. I had to reveal my hand a little earlier than I wanted to. I nodded to Mr. Rhodes, who stood up and stepped toward the judge's bench. "Your Honor, my client has already secured permanent housing," Rhodes said calmly. He handed the judge a deed and a set of keys. "She is the sole owner of a penthouse at the St. Regis. It was purchased through a shell company, 3 Kings LLC, to protect the children's privacy from their father's aggressive lifestyle." Thayer's smirk vanished. He looked at me, then at the deed. "The St. Regis? How? Where did you get that kind of money?" "It doesn't matter where it came from, Mr. Thayer," the judge said, looking impressed by the documents. "What matters is that it's a far better environment than a motel. Motion for emergency custody is denied. We will revisit this after the divorce is finalized." Thayer was fuming as we left the courtroom. "You're hiding money, Hadley," he hissed in the hallway. "I'm going to find out where you're getting it, and I'm going to take it." "Good luck, Thayer," I said, walking past him. "You're going to need it." Thayer was getting paranoid. He could feel the walls closing in, even if he didn't know why. Every time he tried to make a secure executive decision, it was mysteriously overturned by the majority shareholder proxy. Every time he tried to use the company jet for a personal trip, he received a maintenance delay notice. He began screaming at his staff in the middle of the office. I watched him on the hidden security feed from my new penthouse. "Who is the proxy?" he roared, throwing a stapler across the room. "Why won't they meet with me? I am the CEO. I should know who owns 51% of this company." He ordered a full forensic audit of the IT department to find the leak. He thought someone in the building was spying on him for the board. He spent 3 days firing people he suspected were disloyal. I sat on my sofa, eating a bowl of buttered popcorn, and watched him spiral. He looked tired. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his expensive suits were starting to look wrinkled. He was losing his grip on the empire he thought he had won. "He looks like a cornered animal," I told Ford, who was trying to climb onto the coffee table. "He's so busy looking for a spy in the office that he's forgotten to look at the woman he kicked out in the rain." I felt a strange sense of calm. The more he panicked, the more mistakes he made. He was spending all his energy on the mystery and none on the actual business. The company's stock was starting to dip because of his erratic behavior. "Just 4 more days, Thayer," I whispered to the screen. "Enjoy the view while you still have it. It's a long way down." I turned off the feed and went to play with my sons. For the first time in a year, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like the person holding the keys. The 30 days were finally up. The morning of the CEO confirmation board meeting had arrived. Thayer had spent the last week sending frantic emails to the trust's attorneys, demanding that the majority shareholder proxy attend the meeting in person to finalize his appointment. "They have to be there," he told Winslow over breakfast. I heard it through the baby monitor I had left in the house when I moved out. "Once they see me, they'll know I'm the only one who can run this company. They'll sign the papers, and we'll be officially the most powerful couple in the city." "It's time, Hadley," Mr. Rhodes said, arriving at my penthouse at 8:00 a.m. I went to my bedroom and opened the closet. I hadn't gone to the discount store. I had gone to the high-end designer district with Rhodes' credit card. I pulled out a navy blue power suit that fit me perfectly. It was sharp, professional, and looked like armor. I spent an hour on my hair and makeup. I didn't look like a milk-stained housewife anymore. I looked like the daughter of a billionaire. I looked like a woman who owned the room. I dressed Ford, Blaine, and Calloway in tiny, matching navy blue suits with little silk ties. They looked like the smallest, most adorable executives in the world. "You guys are the real bosses today," I told them as I buckled them into their triple stroller. "Just remember the plan. Look cute, stay quiet, and try not to spit up on the merger agreements." I checked my briefcase. It held the Project Onyx files, the Winslow invoices, and the stock certificates. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a reckoning. "Let's go," I said to Rhodes. "I have a husband to fire." Thayer was already in the office, packing the floor of the executive suite. He was wearing his lucky suit, and his hair was slicked back with a little too much gel. He kept checking his reflection in the glass window. He sent me one last text message at 9:30 a.m. "Don't bother calling me today asking for more money for the boys. I'm busy becoming a legend. From now on, you deal with my lawyers. You're officially a part of my past, Hadley. Get used to it." I looked at the message on my phone as the elevator rose toward the penthouse boardroom. I didn't get angry. I actually laughed. I felt a strange sense of pity for him. He was so incredibly small, even in his biggest moment. I texted him back. "Good luck today, Thayer. I hope you get exactly what you deserve. Break a leg." I put my phone on silent and stepped out of the elevator. The hallway was lined with security guards and assistants. They looked at the woman in the power suit pushing a triple stroller with confused expressions. They didn't recognize the maid who used to bring Thayer his lunch. "The board is waiting, Madam Proxy," the head of security said, bowing slightly. He was one of the people Thayer had tried to fire, but Rhodes had secretly blocked the termination. He knew exactly who I was. "Thank you, Arthur," I said, giving him a small nod. "Is everyone in position?" "The evidence is loaded on the server, and the other board members have been briefed on the mystery guest. They are quite eager to meet you." I gripped the handle of the stroller. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the company on my shoulders. "Let's begin." The boardroom was packed. It was a long, cold room with a massive mahogany table. 12 men in gray and black suits sat around it, looking nervous. They were the minor shareholders and the executive directors. Thayer stood at the head of the table, his hands resting on the back of the chairman's chair. He looked triumphant, like a king about to be crowned. Winslow sat in a chair in the far corner of the room, wearing a bright red dress, clutching her phone, ready to tweet the big news. "Gentlemen," Thayer announced, his voice booming with fake confidence. "Thank you for joining me on this historic day. We are just waiting for the majority shareholder proxy to arrive. I have been in contact with their legal team, and I expect they will arrive any moment to simply rubber stamp my permanent appointment as CEO." "Are you sure they're coming, Thayer?" one of the directors asked. "They've been very elusive." "Trust me," Thayer said, flashing a shark-like grin. "They know I'm the only one who can take Apex Global to the next level. They've seen my numbers. They know I'm a winner." Winslow clapped her hands, her diamonds sparkling in the overhead lights. She looked at Thayer with a look of pure, calculated adoration. They were so close to the prize they could taste it. Then, the heavy double doors at the end of the room swung open. The sound was like a clap of thunder. Every head in the room turned. I walked in. I didn't rush. I pushed the triple stroller slowly, the wheels gliding silently on the expensive marble floor. I looked straight ahead, my eyes locked on Thayer. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, like it might crush the walls. Thayer's jaw dropped so low I thought it might actually hit the table. The color drained from his face until he was the color of old parchment. He looked at me, then at the suit, then at the stroller. "Hadley," he gasped, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "What? What are you doing here? This is a closed-door executive meeting. Security, how did she get past the lobby? I didn't stop. I pushed the stroller all the way to the head of the table. I stopped right in front of him. Get out, Thayer screamed, his face turning a bright, angry red. You're crashing a multi-billion-dollar meeting. You're embarrassing yourself. Arthur, get this woman and these children out of my boardroom right now. Security didn't move. Arthur just stood by the door, his arms crossed, looking at the ceiling. Sit down, Thayer, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it projected clearly to every corner of the room. It was the voice of a woman who was in total control. Don't you talk to me like that, he shrieked. You're a stay-at-home mother. You have no standing here. This is for shareholders only. You don't even own the clothes on your back. Actually, Thayer, Mr. Rhodes said, stepping into the room behind me and placing a hand on my shoulder. She owns a lot more than that. Winslow stood up in the corner, her face pale with confusion. Thayer, what is she talking about? Why is the maid here? I didn't look at her. I didn't even acknowledge her existence. I just looked at the men at the table. Gentlemen, I said, I apologize for the delay. The strollers are a bit wider than the elevator doors. I parked the stroller at the very head of the table, the spot reserved for the chairman of the board. I sat down in the high-backed leather chair. Thayer was shaking now, his hands clutching the back of the chair next to mine. This is some kind of sick joke. Hadley, did you steal money from your father? Did you forge some papers? Mr. Rhodes stepped forward and opened his briefcase. He pulled out the original stock certificates and the legal trust documents. He laid them out on the table for the other board members to see. Gentlemen and Mr. Thayer, Rhodes said, his voice cold and professional. May I officially introduce the majority shareholders of Apex Global, Mr. Ford Larkin, Mr. Blaine Larkin, and Mr. Callaway Larkin. They hold 51% of the controlling voting stock. The board members leaned in, their eyes wide. They looked at the three bobbies, who were currently busy trying to see who could pull on their own tie the hardest. And may I introduce their mother and the sole executive proxy appointed by the late chairman, Rhodes continued. Mrs. Hadley. She wields the full voting power of the Larkin estate. She is, for all intents and purposes, the chairman of this board. Silence, absolute terrified silence. Thayer looked at Ford, then at Blaine, then at Callaway. He looked at the sons he had called financial liabilities and milk-stained burdens. He looked at the children he was planning to exile to Switzerland. This can't be real, he whispered, his legs finally giving out. He slumped into a chair, his eyes glazed with shock. They're bobbies. They don't know what a company is. They don't have to, I said, looking him right in the eye. Because I do. It's not a joke, Thayer, I said, opening my own briefcase and pulling out the silver tablet. And unlike your management style, it's completely legal. I hit a button on the tablet, and the massive screen at the end of the boardroom flickered to life. I projected the Project Onyx files for everyone to see. Thayer was planning to fire 2,000 of your most loyal employees, I told the board. He was going to outsource our manufacturing to a sweatshop to inflate his own bonus. He was going to destroy the quality and the reputation of this company for a single quarter of profit. The board members gasped. They looked at the data, the names of the factories, and the cost-cutting measures. Thayer, you told us Onyx was a new product line, one of them shouted. I was doing what was best for the shareholders, Thayer stammered, his face covered in sweat. No, you were doing what was best for yourself, I said. I hit another button. The screen changed to a series of invoices and wire transfers. The headline at the top read, Wire transfers to W-Star Marketing Solutions. And while he was planning to fire 2,000 workers, I continued, he was also embezzling $2 million of company funds to pay his mistress, Winslow, for consulting services that never happened. Here are the receipts for her jewelry, her clothes, and her car, all paid for by the Apex Global payroll account. The board members erupted. They were standing up now, pointing at the screen, their faces full of rage. They weren't just shareholders, they were men who had been lied to and cheated. "You stole from us, Thayer," the oldest director roared. "You used our money to fund your affair." Winslow stood in the corner, looking like she wanted to melt into the floor. She realized the yacht was sinking, and she didn't have a life jacket. Winslow tried to sneak toward the back door, her heels clicking frantically on the floor. She didn't even look at Thayer. She was already mentally deleting his contact info. "Wait," Arthur said, blocking the door with his massive frame. "The police are on their way to discuss the W-Star accounts. You should stay and hear the end of the meeting." Thayer turned a bright, bruised purple. He looked at me, his eyes full of a pathetic, desperate rage. "You did this. You've been spying on me. You're a snake, Hadley." "Actually," I said, leaning back in the chairman's chair, "I'm just the proxy. I was doing my job. I was protecting the shareholders' assets from a financial liability." "Isn't that what you called the boys, Thayer?" "You can't do this," he screamed, slamming his fist on the table. "I am the CEO. I built this company's current image. You're just a housewife. You don't have the guts to run this place." "Actually," I said, looking at Ford. He was gurgling happily and had just slammed his plastic rattle onto the mahogany table with a loud thwack. "The chairman says your performance is lacking," I translated with a small smile. I looked at the 12 other men at the table. "Gentlemen, we have a motion on the floor. In light of the evidence of grand larceny, embezzlement, and corporate negligence, I move for the immediate termination of Thayer as CEO, effective this second, for cause." "I second the motion," the director next to me shouted, his face red with anger. "All those in favor?" I asked. I raised my hand. I represented 51% of the vote. It didn't even matter what the others said, but every single hand in the room went up. Even the men Thayer thought were his friends couldn't wait to vote him out. "The motion carries," I said, looking at the clock. "It's 10:45 a.m. Thayer, you are no longer an employee of Apex Global." "And since you were terminated for cause," Rhodes added, standing up to face Thayer. "According to the morality and ethics clause in your contract, you are forfeiting every single stock option and your entire severance package. You are leaving this building with exactly what you brought into the marriage: nothing." Thayer fell to his knees. He looked like a man who had been struck by lightning. He was weeping now, real tears of self-pity. "Hadley, please," he sobbed, reaching out for my hand across the table. I pulled my hand away before he could touch me. "We're family. Think of the boys. They need a father with a career. I can fix this. I'll pay it back." "I am thinking of the boys," I said, my voice as cold as a winter morning. "That's why I'm removing the biggest liability in their lives. You weren't a father to them, Thayer. You were a man who wanted to send them to Switzerland so they wouldn't ruin your aesthetic." I stood up and signaled to Arthur. "Since he is no longer an employee, he has no right to be in this building. And since the company car and the company apartment were perks of the CEO position, we'll be needing those keys back. Now." Arthur stepped forward and held out his hand. Thayer slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out the keys to the Porsche and the estate. He dropped them into Arthur's hand with a look of pure despair. Winslow looked at him from across the room. She scoffed, her face full of disgust. "You're broke," she asked, her voice sharp and metallic. "You told me you were a king, Thayer. You told me you were untouchable." She pulled a diamond ring off her finger, the one he had bought with company money, and threw it at him. It bounced off his chest and rolled under the table. She stormed out of the room without looking back, leaving him in the middle of the floor, alone. Security escorted Thayer out of the building through the front lobby. I watched from the massive glass window of the boardroom as he was led out onto the sidewalk. He didn't have a car. He didn't have a job. He didn't have a mistress. He stood on the curb in his expensive suit, looking around as if he expected a limo to arrive and save him. But the only thing that arrived was the rain. It started to pour, just like the night he had kicked me out of the gala. I walked out of the building behind him, pushing the triple stroller. The valet had brought my new, armored SUV to the curb. Arthur held the door open for me. Thayer saw me. He ran toward the car, falling to his knees in the puddles. He looked like a drowned rat. "Hadley, please," he wept, his face covered in mud and tears. "I made a mistake. I was blinded by the power. I love you. I love the boys. Give me one more chance." I stopped by the car door. I looked down at him. I didn't feel hate. I didn't even feel happy. I just felt done. "You didn't make a mistake, Thayer," I said, my voice quiet and steady. "You made a choice. You chose a title over your family. You chose a socialite over your sons, and now you've lost all of them." "I have nothing," he cried. "Yes," I said. "You have exactly what you gave me. You have yourself. I hope you enjoy the company." I buckled the boys into their car seats. They were laughing, happy to be out of the stuffy room. I closed the door and didn't look back as the car pulled away, leaving Thayer standing on the curb in the rain, screaming at the sky. He had underestimated the quiet one, and it had cost him the world. I stood in the CEO's office, Thayer's old office, looking out at the city as the sun began to break through the clouds. The office was quiet now. The gold desk was gone, replaced by a modern wooden one. The photos of Thayer and Winslow had been replaced by a single, large frame of my 3 sons. I wasn't the CEO. I didn't want to be. I knew my strengths and I knew my limits. I had hired a brilliant, competent woman named Alina, someone Thayer had passed over for a promotion twice, to run the day-to-day operations. She was already at work, reviewing the outsourcing plans and meeting with the union reps. But I was the guardian. I was the proxy. I was the person who held the ultimate power to ensure that this company was run with the integrity my father had intended. I looked at Ford, Blaine, and Calloway playing on the plush rug in the corner of the office. They were building a tower with colorful blocks. They were safe. Their future was secure. They would never be sent to a boarding school against their will. They would grow up knowing they were loved, not just as heirs, but as people. I picked up the phone on the desk. "Yes, Alina, this is Hadley. I just saw the list of the 2,000 workers. Please send out an official announcement this afternoon. Every single one of them is being rehired with a 5% loyalty bonus. And let them know the manufacturing plant is staying right where it is." "They'll be thrilled, Mrs. Hadley," Alina said. "Good, everyone deserves a home." I hung up the phone and felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in 5 years. The war was over. The liabilities had taken their throne, and the milky-stained housewife was the one who had cleared the path. 6 months later, I am sitting on a blanket in the park, the sun warm on my shoulders. Ford, Blaine, and Calloway are running through the grass, chasing a golden retriever we adopted last month. They are happy, healthy, and full of life. I am no longer the woman who counts coins for milk. I am no longer the woman who stays in the shadows of a gala. I am Hadley Larkin, and I am the person who reclaimed a legacy for her children. Thayer is living in a small studio apartment in another state, working a mid-level accounting job. He's banned from the industry for life. Winslow disappeared into the social scene of another country, looking for her next king. They are both footnotes in a story that they thought they owned. I look at my sons. They don't know about Apex Global yet. They don't know they own 51% of a billion-dollar empire. To them, I am just Mama, the person who gives them hugs and makes them grilled cheese sandwiches. And that is the only title I ever really wanted. The kings had taken their throne, and they had brought their mother with them. I watch the boys trip over their own feet and fall into the grass, laughing at the sheer joy of being alive. I smile, picking up a ball and throwing it for the dog. I spent years believing Thayer was the sun, and I was just a moon reflecting his light. I was wrong. I was the one who kept the fire burning, and now that he's gone, the light is brighter than ever. The milk-stained housewife had fired the CEO, and she had never looked better. I take a deep breath of the fresh air and pull my sons into a big, messy hug. We are free, we are whole, and we are just getting started.